Dhriti, and I love to travel. Over the past couple of years, I've been to more than 20 countries, and I just love learning the new languages there. And I speak like more than four languages, and it's just been a great experience.
Perfect. And in fact, how is Europe? I know you spent the last 2 weeks in Europe.
Yeah, so this time we tried something different and we went to Central Europe. So we went to cities like Prague, Vienna, and Budapest. And I feel like the history and the architecture there is something you cannot beat. It was amazing.
Awesome. Awesome. Those are all on the bucket list. So,
Yeah.
everyone, this is Dhriti Sonthalia. She's a sophomore at CMC, so Claremont Mckenna College, close to Los Angeles, majoring in economics. Today, we'll be hearing a little more from Dhriti about the choices she's made, the lessons she's learned along the way, as well as advice and insight to young high schoolers like yourself listening to the podcast as you prepare for a new and exciting next phase of your life that we call as university. So, welcome to University Unravel. I'm your host, Arya Darod. I currently study at Minerva University. Welcome, Jiti, and excited for the conversation.
My pleasure.
Awesome. So I'll start with a difficult question and put you on the spot. You got offers from UCLA and CMC. My guess is that someone listening to the podcast might more people would have heard of UCLA versus CMC, like it's just more well known overall, even internationally. But two very good universities, but very different in terms of just size and approach to learning. I'm sure it was a difficult decision, but why ultimately did you choose CMC?
So I completely agree with your thoughts. So when I even got an offer from UCLA, that time I was a little settled in my head that yes, I've gotten into someplace good, and now I know I could go there. And everybody around me also was like so happy about it. Everybody had heard about UCLA, and they're like, yeah, you should go there for sure. And then later, I think after a couple of days, I got my decision from CMC and a couple of other colleges. I had gotten to a few others, but at the end, it was between UCLA and CMC. Again, completely opposite colleges. CMC was something I had barely heard of. I had just applied there because my guidance counselor told me, yeah, it's a really good liberal arts college, and especially for economics, and that's something I wanted to major in. So that was the one and only liberal arts college I'd applied to, and I was accepted there. So when it came down to deciding where I wanted to go, first, of course, the pro and con list. So I started off with that, and then I compared the size, the way of classes, the subject availability, the resources, and everything. And still, I was convinced that UCLA is the better choice because it was a known name. I know people going there, and it was just, yeah, a more comfortable option. Claremont McKenna, again, a very new school I had barely heard of. I did not know anybody that went there. So I was very hesitant about it. So then I consulted with friends, family, and then a few other guidance counselors. And they all sat me down and they said, don't think about the name or the ranking, like look beyond that. So then I started looking at CMC at a greater depth and detail. And then I noticed how they structure their classes, the professor to student ratio, the resources there, and especially transitioning from a small private school here doing IB, going to a small private college there, it felt a lot safer. I think even for my parents, it was a better option. And for me also, even though it's near a large metropolitan city, it's still away, it's still in the suburbs. So, in terms of the safety aspect, and with the five colleges around, it just forms a great community. So, that's how I just ended up choosing CMC, and I'm here now.
Perfect. Yeah, I mean, we will touch upon the five colleges. That's something I'm curious to hear more about. Um, I think an intention of mine with the podcast, just yesterday, I was doing an episode with someone from Swarthmore, Pomona, CMC, Harvey Mudd, amazing liberal arts colleges.
Yeah,
I don't know why more international students just aren't aware of them. And so, even
agreed.
for someone like you saying to another person that you chose CMC over UCLA, I'm sure it was just also difficult to say because
It's
it.
always been difficult. It's still the task because people still ask me, where do you go? So I say CMC, but I always have to mention it's near LA. And then they're like, okay. But if I say UCLA, everybody knows it.
Yeah, yeah. So a bold decision. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think this whole episode, my intention is to break this myth of prestige and ranking being everything for a university And I'm sure we'll dive a lot into how your experience at CMC has paid off in terms of the choice to go to, let's say, a lesser well-known college than a UCLA. But so I'm clear in my mind. For listeners who are still a little apprehensive, I want to dive a little deeper and push you even further. Why is just the ranking or the prestige of a university not the only important thing when you make the choice? Like, what are other important things to factor in when choosing the university?
So when it came to ranking, I noticed that these really good liberal arts colleges, as you mentioned, Claremont McKenna, Swarthmore, Pomona, none of them are on the bigger rankings because there's just small colleges. The bigger rankings only focus on universities. So that's why they're all missing, but they're all up there in terms of the education, the facilities, and just how good the professors are. I think they're comparable, like as good, sometimes even better in a few fields as the bigger universities. It's just that they're smaller. They have focus on like smaller fields, and they maintain limited class sizes so you can have that personal attention and interaction with your professors and other faculty. So that's why I believe that the ranking was not the only idea or not the only thing you should look at when making your choice. A few other factors that I majorly considered were location. For me, the weather, what the proximity was to other places, and a big city, so it's accessible to like airports or just other basic facilities. And then obviously what their course offerings were. So what I did was I opened up their website of the academics and saw what their department looked like, how they function, what courses they offer, and what you need to do to fulfill your major. Initially, I was apprehensive about the entire liberal arts system of how I'll have to take classes in politics and science and everything because I was like, yeah, now that I'm done with high school, I don't have to get into these subjects again and just focus on my major. But now I've come to realize it is so important to learn beyond what your major is. It gives you like a holistic point of view of the entire world and what's happening, and also opens up a lot of avenues because I know so many people. They start off maybe as an economics major, but after maybe taking a government class or a psychology class, decide to change their major. So that's the good part of a liberal arts system. So it helps so much in that avenue.
Hmm. Why is it important to have that holistic view of the world as someone in your case who, let's say, has studied five, six different subjects apart from economics versus maybe someone who's just doing economics? What's the difference?
So in today's world, what like constantly changing, I feel like suppose you are just an economics major, you have studied nothing else, and maybe the job market isn't the greatest.
Mhm.
Then you're stuck. Like you have no other options left for yourself. You just, if you're not getting a job in economics, you don't have knowledge about anything else. You're like, you have nothing to do unless you figure out yourself and come up with an alternative. You're practically stuck. But when you have inputs from other subjects, you can just, I feel like, combine everything and just apply knowledge and build your skills in a certain way that you know so much that you can handle a constantly changing world and then face what the job market or what the economy looks like and then like uh, pave your way through it.
Yeah, I personally feel like no subject can be studied in just isolation.
Yeah, agreed.
I had a PPE student from Oxford. She was doing philosophy, political science, and economics. She very strongly believed that you can't study economics without some basis in philosophy and political science. I feel like beyond economics, this applies to arts, this applies to the sciences. I feel like there's always adjacent fields where it's good to know. And I'm sure there's a lot of transfer that goes on. Like I'm sure even a government class, you see transfer with your economics class, a political science class, a philosophy class, psychology class. Um,
Yeah, that's
so
always the case. Even at CMC, we have PPE, which is very popular, and then we there's the EEP, which combines environment, economics, and politics. So a lot of these majors, and people like always do economics and public policy or economics and government, economics and like psychology. So it's a wide range of majors you can like play around with and figure your path out.
hmm, I'm sure your in interactions with friends or family who are going to big, well-known universities, public or private, but just huge universities where they're sitting in a lecture hall with like 200, 300 students. Just from whatever interactions you've had with them, what are a few significant differences between your experience at CMC versus their experience at a much, much larger institution?
So yeah, there's I think a big difference when it comes to this lecture style of classes. As I mentioned, my biggest lecture was around 45 students, and that's the biggest class that CMC will ever get. It's called Econ 50. It's like the most basic econ class, and you usually take it as a freshman. So that was my biggest class, and that's the biggest it'll get. But I've heard my friends at like bigger universities, such as the UCs, where their lectures go up to like 400 students. That's when you're sitting in an assigned seat. Your professor does not know your name. You barely know your professor. It's usually teacher assistants taking your class. You go to like seminar groups after your lectures, interact with the teacher assistants and everything, and then you get through that class. But at CMC, it looks completely different. So when first of all, your professor knows your name. He knows or she knows everybody's name in the class. So it's not like even if it's a lecture style system, they will not know who you are. And then it's again, even it's a lecture, it's very interactive. So you can always ask questions, you can always interact with the professor. There's always discussions happening in class. And I feel like things like office hours and all become a lot smoother. So you don't really have a system of TAs here. Yes, you have peer tutors and all, which you can go to if it's like a difficult class, if it's like math or like some engineering based class, you always have peer tutors who have done this course before and they can help you out. But otherwise, you can always approach your professor. You can go to office hours, not very crowded. So you can always just walk in. You can like just book additional appointments with your professor. So it just you can form a really good connect. So sometimes what happens is because of your good interactions with your professor, you get like research opportunities or you get like jobs with your professor. So it's a really great experience. And then this is more like the lecture style classes where it's like 35, 40 students. Our actual main classes are more seminars, which is limited to around 15, 18. Like 18 is the maximum you'll ever see. That's when you're sitting in like a more circular manner, like you're facing your peers, your teachers, your professors usually just in the front, you're sometimes in the middle, roaming around class, where they sometimes present a topic, you have fluid discussions, you always are allowed to share what you think, you do readings, and then you share your thoughts. So it's always you learning from other people as well and your professor rather than just listening to lecture material from a professor. So that's been a very good insight. And because we have an international community and now with an increasing international community, you learn so much not just only about the United States because college is there, but from students from across the world. Like I've met students from Brazil, from East Asia, from Europe. It's just a very diverse population.
Yeah, I mean, our Minerva classes, we actually have a rule that the prof can't be talking for more than 10 minutes straight.
Yeah.
Once that's done, they will have to like hand over the virtual mic to another student. And so I genuinely feel like as much as I've learned from a professor in my classroom, I've learned almost as much from peers who are
Yeah, totally agree.
intelligent, come from very different backgrounds compared to you. And for someone who's probably going to be working in a workplace, not just with Indians, with people from all over, you're also learning like cultural nuances in terms of dealing with such people in the workplace, like how their culture is, how they approach something. I feel like that's really valuable as a perspective.
Yeah.
I maybe this is again a basic and slightly redundant question, but I feel like as I'm pushing you further to explain your thoughts, I feel like we're getting closer to the crux, and as if like when you ask the five whys, you get to the bottom
Yeah.
of principles. So you've touched upon why it's important that a professor knows your name and there is that level of interaction versus, let's say, just a one-way stream of information as is common in a lecture hall with like 300, 400 students. So setting aside, let's say, opportunities like research opportunities and internships, which I'm sure are very well available to you because you're so close to professors, how does the fact that the classroom is so small and the professor like knows you on a first name basis, how does that improve your learning experience?
So when it comes to the professor knowing your name or just the group being small, I feel like it makes it a lot more comfortable for you to like open up, to share your thoughts and to speak up in class. Because me being an introvert myself, if I had seen a crowd of 400, I would have never bothered to raise my hand and like ask a question or share my thoughts. But when I see just those 15 people around me or the 15, 20 people, it's a lot easier. Now, when you're meeting those 15, 20 people on a weekly basis or like every 2 days, you get to know them on a personal level. You know each one's names, it's easy for you to make friends. So then when you know that group of people, you just become so comfortable that you're able to share whatever you want to say. You're able to express even controversial opinions and different thoughts that you wouldn't have been able to do otherwise in a bigger classroom setting, because I feel like that fear of like what will people think of me, or just what if, what if I say something really like extreme, how will people react to it. So when it's a smaller group and you know it's a comfortable and open setting, it just gets easier to have those more like intelligent conversations and more meaningful interactions. So I feel like that's really helped me also open up as a person and be able to become slightly more social and more expressive.
Hmm. I think more than just understanding the content, being able to communicate the content and express
Yeah. So
that.
whatever you're taking in, you're getting time, enjoying class to like process it, and then also share what you think about it. So it's just not like continuously taking the content in and then after class having to like deal with it yourself. It's working through the content together. So just a lot more in-depth learning that goes through it.
Hmm. Yeah, and I think communication, I would put it in the top five in terms of
Yeah,
career, right? And you're practicing this day in and day out. Like maybe when you entered the classroom on the first day, you weren't the best at expressing your thoughts or disagreeing with someone, but like practice makes perfect. And I'm
agree.
sure over time it's improving as a skill. And like it's really that small classroom is forcing you to communicate. Like I'm sure if you're quiet for half an hour, somebody's going to check in and be like, Dhriti, what's up?
Yeah. So I'll tell you from experience, during my first semester, these seminar classes I used to hate. I was like, I'm not the kind of person who's like able to like immediately participate in discussions and respond. But it grew over me. After a point, I learned. And then during my second semester, I took this class, a freshman humanities seminar. Like you have to take it at CMC regardless, where my topic was Tales of the Heroic. So we read ancient Greek, Roman books about different heroes, very difficult text. So every day we were assigned so much reading and we had to come and discuss that. So for 2 hours, we would sit in a group of like 12 students with the professor and just discuss those texts. So initially, one or two classes, I kept quiet because it was very difficult for me to open up. Then I started participating and I saw the improvement or like difference in myself, that I'm able to even comprehend and share my thoughts on texts that are so difficult and challenging for me to like understand myself. But now over time, I'm learning based on how other people are figuring this out. I took tips from them. I worked with a friend and then figured my way out this class. And then towards the end, I was fully participating. And I was like, I'm so glad I took a class that challenged me and pushed me beyond my bounds, because during the first 2 weeks, I was ready to drop out of that class and like figure out something else where I don't have to speak so much. But yeah.
No, I'm glad you stuck with it and it felt like that.
Yeah.
Even though it was challenging, it feels like eventually that was an enjoyable class in terms of opening up. And I feel like with difficult content, specifically when you're comfortable with classmates and professors, it's much easier to open up and say, this went totally over my head, or like, I'm really confused about this. Can we talk through this? And then seeing your classmates also contributing to help you understand something is also emotionally a good experience, I think.
I feel like that's a really good part about CMC is it's very so there people are competitive, but in different ways when it comes to like clubs and extracurriculars and all. But I think when it comes to a classroom and an environment, because we don't have too many systems of like curves and all, nobody's so worried. Everybody's always willing to collaborate, work with each other, and like help people get through the class together. So it's very common for somebody to like work in a peer group and study for an exam or a final and get through problem sets together or discuss material. So that's a very supportive community, I feel like, that has been created and just helps people settle in a lot better.
You sort of segued into a question, the next question I'm about to
Yeah.
ask you, which is if you were to speak directly to a listener who maybe entering the podcast hadn't heard of CMC, now it's an option they're seriously considering. What kind of student, or more broadly, what kind of person do you think should come to CMC and would thrive?
See, I feel like everybody can fit in, but these smaller colleges really help an introvert or somebody who's more reserved to thrive because you're not thrown into a large environment with a lot of students and for you to fend for yourself completely right out of school. It's more where you're given the guidance, where you are safe and protected. The surroundings is also very like a conducive environment. So you with the smaller class sizes, it's easy to know all your peers, to make friends. And even when it comes to the faculty, the deans and all are super close. Like our dean of students, she wishes everyone on their birthdays personally. So that's how connected we are to our dean and our faculty. So it's been a great experience. And so usually, yes, introverts and more reserved people would thrive for sure. But I feel like even extroverts have their fun with the 5C community and the consortium. It just like it gives you so many opportunities to go beyond just the CMC bubble, to interact with people from other colleges who are doing other majors, who are interested in other fields except like economics and like government and politics. So that's another thing. And CMC is known as one of the most popular liberal art party colleges. So you have it all.
Nice, nice. But yeah, I mean, specifically, I've seen introverts thrive at Minerva as well, just because after a certain point, in our case, we do get cold called in class. You can't
Yeah.
do a single class without speaking.
Yeah.
In the beginning, you hate it, but eventually, when when the professor also becomes more like a friend who's just like 40 years older than you,
Yeah.
plus when the students also become on a personal basis more friends, I feel like even if you enter class confused, tired, sleepy, by the time you exit the class, just because of the interactions you've had and having worked through it together versus just consuming content one way, I feel like you enter class, exit class on just a more positive emotional note as well.
Yeah.
Is the feel I'm also getting from what you're
For
saying.
sure. Yeah, it's like sometimes you get so close to professors that professors call students for a barbecue dinner at home or like for different things. Like I know a professor, she was hosting a Thanksgiving dinner. So in case you didn't have a place to go for Thanksgiving, she invited all her students to come home and celebrate Thanksgiving with her. So I feel like these are the deeper connections and bonds you form when it's a smaller class size and you just have those personal interactions with a professor.
Very true. We'll segue into economics as in terms of the course
Yeah.
for you potentially. What are a few potential career paths that an economics degree at CMC could potentially lead to?
So from what I've seen in my first year there, there's like two major fields that people venture into. One consulting and one finance and investment banking and all. So those are like the two most popular options, which there are lots of clubs for people engage in that, start recruiting, prepare for it early on, and eventually lead up there. But I've also seen people venture into fields of wealth management, asset management, entrepreneurship. Like a lot of people straight out of college end up starting their own business, have a startup, and then work with investors. Then you can do things like venture capital, um, hedge fund management. There's a lot of honestly options. Then I've also seen a set group of people who then want to do pursue a higher degree. And then I think economics opens up a lot of options for like people who want to do law. So people go to law school, or people do an MBA, or different things like that. But these are, I think, top are banking, consulting, either research or business, where most people end up going.
The two major parts you mentioned were one, finance and investment,
Consulting.
and two, consulting.
Yes,
Uh,
right.
why why not do a business major? Like, why did you do economics over a business or a finance major?
So when I was applying, very few undergraduate colleges actually have a business degree. So I feel like economics is more established. It's been there for years. It has theory behind it, and that's why it's considered a more traditional major. Business, on the other hand, is a more upcoming, growing major, and it's more based, I feel like, on real life scenarios and like current setups. So when you do business, you don't get so much into the math of things. Like when I'm doing economics, it delves a lot into the math, the theory, and all. But business is more practical knowledge. So I had like maybe two or three college options that I got into for business, whereas for economics, much better colleges and much more established degrees. And I feel like that's why I decided to um, stick to economics, build a good foundation in my 4 years of my undergraduate degree, and then when to do business, like either work and then pursue an MBA, or because I have a family business back home, work with my dad or work with my cousins and learn the business. I feel like business is something you learn while doing. So the practical knowledge you can get while actually either intoning or learning from somebody else. So I feel like economics served as a better foundation in case I wanted to do something else in the future.
That's an interesting point. I've had this brought up on the podcast that you learn business by doing business. If you even, I've even had people on the podcast suggest that if someone is interested in business or entrepreneurship, either go the technical path and do like a computer science or data
Yeah.
science, or at least do economics so that your foundations are correct. You've got the theory all in, and then business is more practical in terms of your internships, or like in your case, working under your father and cousins with the family business. Um,
Yeah,
so
agreed. That's how it is. Everybody said if you want a good foundation, if you want to leave your avenues open for the future because you still don't know what you want to do, stick to economics, build your base, and then explore beyond. Because business can be learned in a 1 year, 2 year MBA as well. You don't have to spend 4 years of your undergraduate degree doing business.
Hmm, interesting. And I think a lot of what you're saying might be opening the minds of, let's say there's someone listening to the podcast who's interested in doing business. I feel like you've just given them a unique perspective and a
Yeah.
new path to take. So lovely. If there's someone who doesn't enjoy math too much, like they don't want to dive deep into math, but they love economics, they love the theory, they love the models, is it possible to pursue and do well in economics while to some extent leaving the math to the side?
So yes, it is possible, but see, I haven't seen too much of economics degrees at other colleges. At CMC, they are math heavy. You need to do calculus, at least till calculus 2. You need to do a stats class. You need to do a bit of data science here and there. So you do have math applications to do well in your class. Like you are not allowed to do like intermediate microeconomics or macroeconomics without doing calculus. You cannot do your class on econometrics without doing statistics. So it's all math dependent. So I feel like if you don't involve math in economics, it just becomes plain simple theory and you're not actually applying that theory. I'm
Mm.
pretty sure there are colleges where you do more general economics in terms of theory and ideas and everything. And if you study things like behavioral economics and all, I feel like it's more content than math. But if you actually want to do pure economics with good application and which you can eventually use in fields of finance and business and all, math is necessary and important.
So you're saying math is grounding like more abstract economic theories and concepts into reality in terms of.
Yes, agreed. Like I learned theories of consumer choice theory and production theory and all. Yes, you can understand the theory without math, but if you actually want to apply it to an economy or to a producer or a consumer, you need to use calculus fundamentals and use those equations and then apply it to derive something out of it. Like you will understand the theory without math, but without the math, you're not gonna be able to put it to use.
Interesting. No, that's a solid argument. I'll take us back a little further in time. So we'll rewind a little bit to your high school days, grades 9 to 12, in terms of when you were actually applying to CMC as well as all these other schools. Would love to just walk through, apart from the traditional, you did IB, you took the SAT, maybe the ACT. What were some other interesting activities you were engaged in during high school, which made your application unique and attractive to a good university in the US?
So to be honest with you, in the ninth grade, I was extremely confused. Like I didn't know what to do. I was like, yeah, I have time. I'll start my activities later and everything. So starting 10th is when I actually built my base. I had a good sense that I wanted to do something related to economics, finance, or business. So I started revolving my application around that. I started participating in activities, in different competitions, or just like discussions that involved economics and finance. So I started my own project of a podcast and a curriculum and different sorts of things regarding um, personal finance for teens, so financial literacy for teenagers. And then eventually I dived into like co-founding the finance club at Indus to do investment competitions and a few other activities like this. So this made my major like finance economics base strong. Then apart from that, two other major activities I had was I've been doing dance, like classical dance and piano since I was maybe like 4 or 5 years old. So by the time I applied, I'd done it for like 13 years. I'd given exams, I practiced on a weekly basis. So it just showed commitment, perseverance, and all in my application for something I've done for so long and just taken it further. So what I did was with dance, I started going to orphanages and teaching underprivileged students. So that showed just beyond learning. I was applying my learning, doing something more with it, and in terms of community service. Then also, I did a few summer programs. Summer programs, I've come to learn that like just a few of them don't really contribute so much to your application. It's just for you learning or you getting credits. But yes, a few competitive ones which you apply to and it gives you like a good experience that definitely adds to your application. So one that I did was YYGS, Yale Young Global Scholars. Because of COVID, I didn't have the opportunity to actually go to Yale and do it. I did the online version of it, but that was one of the most competitive programs that I did, where it's like a mini college application. So starting November, you apply for it, then you have to add, you have to write essays, add your extracurriculars on it, and then you get selected eventually. And then they have like different fields. So you can do something related to politics, economics, and philosophy, or you can do related to the science. So I was doing the politics, economics, and philosophy one, where you have like seminar based classes, you do lectures with Yale professors and lecturers, and then you have a capstone project and all of that. So that was a very interesting experience. And
Interesting.
then another major part was leadership positions. So whether it was like deputy head girl in my older high school or just like um, leading like clubs or different organizations, that just shows college admissions officers that yes, apart from being involved, you're able to take charge, you're able to manage well.
Hmm. Interesting. YYGS is probably something for high schoolers listening to the podcast to go further and explore into. I've heard this come up as well during different conversations. So it seems like an interesting program. Also, in terms of leadership and community service, I feel like when a university is looking at your application, they're not looking for someone who will just go sit in class, take knowledge, head
Yeah.
back, and just take from the university. They're looking for someone who will give. So, like, what can XYZ person bring to my university in terms of will they start a
Yeah,
club?
because they always want a very diverse community of students.
Yeah, correct. And so I think what can you give to the university? Like, what can you offer versus they're offering you a high quality education? So that's just an interesting, like, mental model when you're actually applying.
Yeah, for sure.
For somebody specifically applying to a US university, any specific best practices or strategies when writing essays?
No, I feel like each student to their own because you're through your essays trying to show beyond your extracurriculars and your academic, just trying to explain to the academic officer, the admissions officer, this is who I am as a person beyond everything else. This is what my personality is. This is what I enjoy doing. This is what I do for fun. This is what gives me joy. So just try to like be as open and be as authentic in your essays and just, yeah, go with the flow.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, interesting. That's an interesting pushback on my question itself. Um, this is also what you said is also probably a good reason beyond just the academic integrity side to not use ChatGPT when writing an essay. I feel
Yeah,
like
for sure. I feel like when you're using ChatGPT, it's just so you can tell like they a fixed structured way of writing. Like it's so like mechanical, but when you're writing yourself, it just flows out differently and it's your own voice.
hmm, yeah, yeah. If you had to briefly touch upon just a few big or small mistakes you made during the entire application process, which you just want to throw out there for someone who's listening to actually avoid completely or just steer clear of.
Yeah, so as I mentioned, starting a little too late. Like, I feel like as soon as you get to ninth grade, it's a good foundation to start thinking about what you like, what you're interested in. I'm not saying start off immediately, but just collect your thoughts, be slightly mentally prepared. So then you can start off your project or whatever on time and then choose your subjects very wisely. So, what I've learned after coming to university, talking to a lot of friends and people who have applied, your subject selection matters. Admissions officers want to see you've challenged yourself, you've given yourself a holistic understanding and opportunity, and you're even though you're challenging yourself, you're trying your best to do well. So they always schools submit like a subject report and things like that where admissions officers are able to see what is offered in that school. So they judge your subject selection based on what your school offers. Like agreed, if a school does not have the resources or the classes, they do not expect you to take what is not there, right? So based on what your school has offered, they want you to take a good, challenging yet balanced array of subjects and do well in them. So I feel like a good starting point is to not limit your options. Keep your options open for science and for the humanities. Take a good mix and then go ahead with your classes. Um, Colleges still do prefer traditional subjects. They prefer economics, physics, chemistry, math. That's a few of the most popular. So always make sure to include those few traditional subjects in your mix. And also, one major thing, do not fear a failure. So I always have this at the back of my head. What if I don't do well? What if things don't work out? So that limited me so much. But I feel like in this generation, it's so easy to just, I think, be out there, experiment with things, and if it's not working out, try something different. So that's something I didn't do. And now I'm trying to change in college and put like try a different opportunity so I'm not restricting myself.
Hmm. What are some ways at CMC that you're trying to push yourself out of your comfort zone?
So, like during high school, I would be scared of like participating in extracurriculars or applying for different positions. But when it at CMC, I'm just like trying to put myself in any opportunity I get. So whatever application opens up, if I'm even slightly interested, I just send in my application. Like I'm like, it's okay. Like I'll try interviewing. If I like it, I'll do it. If I don't get it, it's okay. So I just try to like put myself more out there. I'm trying to also take on a few leadership roles. So I join clubs, organizations, work with them, and eventually try to get to a leadership position. So I know I have built my way up there, and then now I can contribute greater to the CMC community and beyond. So that's how I'm currently like in the process of like getting myself out there, getting more involved with the community.
I think college is the time to one, get your hands dirty, and two, get them dirty all over the place. Like
Yeah,
just stick yourself to, let's say, economics related clubs, but anything that's a potential interest, I feel like it's the time to explore these different things.
for
Uh,
sure.
I personally, the way I would put it, and what I've heard other people say, maybe you have a differing opinion, is spend the minimum amount of time in the classroom which you need to succeed and do well in your exams and understand the content, but save as much time as possible for all the other opportunities that college has to offer in terms of
Yeah,
internships, research. That's a lot of the value beyond just what you're learning in the classroom.
yeah, agreed. Because I feel like during the week, apart from class, and you have, of course, have your homework and you're studying to do, but spend other time, your other hours working in like teams, working in organizations and groups because you learn so much. You get to interact with people you never thought you would interact with, and it just puts you out there and gives you so much like real life experience and knowledge. Is really helpful.
Soft skills which you can't
Yeah,
learn in the
any
class.
day.
We've been throwing around the term liberal arts for a while. You've been saying liberal arts this and liberal arts that. What's your definition of a liberal arts approach to education?
So, as I mentioned, a very holistic education. So, it's basically combining disciplines from like humanities, sciences, math, history, like philosophy. You can just name it and you're going to be studying it. As many courses I have to do for my major, I have to do as a part of my general education liberal arts requirements. Like, I never thought I would have to learn college in, never thought I would have to learn a language in college, but I saw myself doing 2 semesters of Spanish. Um, and I experimented by taking it in Pomona College. So I met kids from the other colleges and did Spanish there for 2 semesters. And then next semester I'm taking a class religion, so I'm doing about religion in like Eastern Europe and places like Israel and all. So I'm learning about religion there. And then I'm doing a history class on Southeast Asia. And then eventually I'll even do introduction to American politics class. So it's just a lot of diverse disciplines coming together to form a holistic base. And then liberal art colleges, as I've seen, tend to be a lot smaller. So in a university, you would see multiple different colleges that come together to form a university. So you'll have an engineering college, an arts college, business, economics, or whatever college. They all form a university as a whole. But a liberal arts college is just one college that offers multiple different majors. And within that college, you have like smaller departments. So because it's a smaller setup, they tend to have like limited students. So my batch size is around 300, 320 kids. I'll probably say we have around 1,200 kids on campus at once, not more, because we have a lot of students going abroad as well to study for semesters or years. And then, yeah, just more, as I've said, smaller seminar style classes, very few lectures, discussion based, um, very high on research institutes and student to professor connection and ratio.
Mm, you perfectly segued into the next question on my mind. I don't know if you tried to do this intentionally, but let's talk a little more about just the general education requirements at CMC. And what do you think are pros and cons of the general education approach? You mentioned that you take as many like non-major specific classes as major specific
Yeah.
classes. Let's dive into that.
So, starting off, I was like, as I've said, why am I doing this? Why am I being put into classes that I'm not interested in at all, and like struggling through it, reading material that's not gonna like get me anywhere. But starting off, actually getting into these classes and spending a little time, I understood that there's a lot more to the world than just what your major is, right? You need to learn beyond that. You need to understand different aspects of human life, population, what is beyond the economy, what is driving the economy. Like if you're doing you need to learn about um, what is driving those decisions in the economy and everything like that. So it just gives you a good idea of the world as a whole. So during my freshman year, I think I took pretty standard classes. So we have something called a freshman writing seminar and a humanities seminar. So you have to take that one in each semester and have to finish it by the end of your freshman year. And it's structured in such a way that it's a writing seminar or a humanities seminar, and there's lots of like topic options that keep changing every semester. So my writing seminar was called The American Dream. So we read different texts and spoke about what the American dream meant, how people perceived it, what their definition of the dream was, what it means today, what are some limitations to facing it, how people are achieving it now. And just it was a very interesting thing, like especially as an international student, to learn about the American history that went behind it, how the definition has changed, and eventually by the end of the course, every student came up with the own definition of their American dream, right? So that was a very nice class. And apart from just reading and comprehending text, in that process, because it's a writing seminar, they teach you how to like tackle different college level writing assignments. What are the different types of essays you need to write? How again they cover the basics of like citations, formatting, and all. So it's a very good foundation. And a humanities seminar takes the approach of again reading very complicated texts, having discussions, being able to participate meaningful conversations and all of that. So just gives you a good base to take the higher level classes that you need to take. Then apart from these, I took Spanish. Because I did Spanish in IB to a certain level, I was able to skip Spanish 1. So you have to take 3 semesters of a language. So I did Spanish 2 and 3, and I'm now done with my language requirements. Then I did Calculus 1 and 2. I could have placed out of Calculus 1, but everybody just recommends, because college level math is different. So to start fresh and do both. And then apart from this, every each semester I took one major related class. Because you have so many general education requirements, you end up taking a good mix. So even next semester, I'm taking 2 economics classes and 2 general education. So it's never just purely economics or purely something else. So my first semester, I took economics 50, which is almost like a rite of passage for most kids at CMC. It's called Principles of Economic Analysis. You just go over the basics. You do both micro, macro, learn about how economic thinking is done, and just build your foundation and make it strong. Then my second semester, because I was done with Calc 1 and Econ 50, both requirements for intermediate micro and macro, I did intermediate microeconomics, where it just that's when your fast-paced learning happened, when you were pushed, you're challenged, learning concepts, applying new concepts with the math and just doing it. So I think that was one of my most challenging classes last semester. So now that's why next semester I'm excited to take statistics and accounting, and also just broadens my knowledge a little more.
Yeah, I mean, tomorrow when you go and talk to someone who's a history major or a literature major, you have some common ground versus
Yes, for
someone
sure.
who has zero common ground with such a person. Like you're overall just a more interesting person, able to have more interesting discussions with anybody as a generalist, which I think even in terms of making friends and a personal life is a good value to have. Plus, if I were to stretch your thought, I would say most classes in university can be directly related to your profession and your career. But I feel like you can also learn things in university which are unrelated but useful to just you living a better life, like you living
Yeah,
well-informed life, being able to make decisions well. Like I'm sure this thought of, let's say, what makes a hero versus what doesn't make a hero maybe comes back to you years down the line as to what is the path I'm heading on.
for sure. Yeah.
Random connect.
Yeah, when then it just teaches you the morals in life, what it makes a good leader. Like forget now hero is like an old concept. Now you transition to what makes a good leader. How can you like be a well-informed person, make rational and valid decisions, and be able to like lead a group or like just a team and work well.
Hmm. We've touched on this so many times that like now I can't delay any longer before asking you about this concept of the five sister colleges. So there's CMC, there's Pomona, there's Scripps, Harvey Mudd, and Pitzer College.
Yes, that's right.
Is there a graduate college, or is that, have I mentioned that?
No, so it's beyond the five C's. There is a graduate college called CGU, Claremont Graduate University, I think. That it's not so much so a part of the 5C consortium because the 5C is just only undergraduate schools, but it's still there. And yes, it's not as popular, but yeah, it's in the
Okay,
same locality and vicinity.
okay. Well, I'm glad we clarified. What does this 5C concept mean for you as a student at CMC?
Just at the top of my head, a big community of very diverse students. So, as I said, CMC very popular for economics, politics, philosophy, government, majors like that. Harvey Mudd very popular for science, STEM degrees. Then we have Pomona popular for like again, it's a mix of all arts, science, and all. Pitzer very arts focused. Scripps is an all girls college. Again, very different environment. So when you get all the students together of these five colleges, you make a very amazing community. So, being a part of the consortium, you're allowed to take classes in any of the five colleges. As I mentioned, I took Spanish in Pomona. I know other friends taking like science classes in Harvey Mudd. It's a very, I feel like, big pool of opportunities that you have access to apart from just academics and classes, you have again the access to 5C clubs. So when you have 5C clubs, you have students again from all the five colleges coming together and working on something. So beyond just again your classes, you're able to make like connections through this. Then again beyond this, then you have your 5C events, you have parties, you have social gatherings and all. So like when we have like South Asian clubs and Indian clubs. So for like different festivals and all, like for Diwali, when
Mm.
you're getting students together, it's not just CMC, it's like all the five C's. So you end up having a good gathering because every each one of these colleges is very small in itself. So when you put together, then you can make that big diverse community. So otherwise, if you just have a class of 300, you're not going to have a very diverse population. It just opens up a lot of different avenues and places to explore.
And for the more extroverted people in CMC, now you've got like
Of
12
course.
times
Yeah,
five.
too many people to interact with.
Potentially,
Yeah,
you've got that big university atmosphere when, let's say, you bring all these five together in
yeah,
the bigger scale parties and events.
for
Uh,
sure.
but moving back into, so I mean, I'm sure there is interaction with these other four colleges, but your community as such on the smallest level is the CMC community, and that is about 350 in your class and about 1200, 1300 in total. Just want to talk about, we've touched upon pros of the community, I feel, but if there's anything we've missed, feel free to talk about that. But also candidly, what are cons of that small and close knit community?
So touching back on a few pros, yes, you can make those personalized connections. You just have it's a more safer, conducive environment and everything. But coming to the cons of things, Because it's a smaller college, of course, you have the limitations of resources, the campus space. Yes, our college is limited. It's a couple of buildings and a little open space, and it's just limited to that. So you're restricted in terms of space. Then again, when it comes to the social aspect, everybody knows everybody. So sometimes you don't have the opportunity to let go, to like get into a group of like completely unknown people and to have different experiences. When you're in the community, you will know somebody or the other. It's just you don't get the opportunity to just, yeah, be with completely new people. Then again, coming back to the resources point, um, it's like when there are smaller and limited resources, that gives you lesser opportunities. So, like people who want on campus jobs, of course, lesser positions to apply for, lesser spots available. Then, when it comes to clubs, again, they get only a certain amount of funding, right? So, they can only support a certain amount of students. So, just always somewhere or the other limited in terms of accessibility. But again, because it's small, you know a lot more about the opportunities, a lot more, and you can access. So just it depends scenario to scenario, but otherwise it's been, yeah, a good experience. Then another small con is liberal art colleges tend to be more in the outskirts, a little away from the cities. So people who enjoy the buzzing city life, the noise of things, will not find it as exciting. And because, yes, the parties also, the social events also, again, limited population, so limited people, because not it's not like everybody's going to go. So somewhere here or there are things missing out, but otherwise, yeah, it's been good.
I think it's a trade-off you make. You've chosen to sacrifice a few aspects of college life, or let's say more connection with profs and the smaller environment, the closer community. Maybe for someone else, a big university is what they want because they're super extroverted and they want the parties, but they're sacrificing some other aspect. So I definitely feel that no college is perfect. It's just what pro is greater to you than the con.
Yeah, like if I had gone to a bigger college, I was guaranteed to find a bigger community of international or Indian students to be able to interact with and make friends with. Here, I knew I will not find more than 10, 12 people from India to like form a good friend group with. So it just also again pushing me out of my bounds to interact with people beyond the international community, for people from the US or people from other parts. And just, yeah, be more open about things and yeah, settle in as things go.
Yeah, I mean, you can't hang out with those 10, 12 people for the entire 4 years. It's forcing you to
Yeah.
be with people from different countries and cultures, which I think is a good thing, versus someone who has like 100 Indian students in the university, and those could be all the people they interact with for the whole
Yeah,
4 years.
for
Like I
sure.
went to the US versus staying back domestically in India. Um, so you came from IBDB, 11th and 12th, which according to most people is like the best possible preparation for a US university education. I'm curious on one side, how did IB classes prepare you well for CMC classes? And what are some things which, in what ways did IB not prepare you well for CMC classes?
So I've honestly done IB all my life. I started off with PYP. That's till fifth grade. Then I did MYP, and then I did DP. So I'm like a fully brought up IB student. So I don't know anything beyond IB. And I honestly believe that it was a great stepping stone for college because from what I see, my a few of my peers coming from like CBSE or like other backgrounds, it was a difficult transition for them. But for me, a very smooth transition because IB just doesn't only focus on the content. They teach you a lot more through the IAs, the different projects that you do. It gives you the opportunity to dive into research, to dive into writing reports and other aspects. And then they always like things like TOK and extended essay also like now in college writing a 4,000 word essay is nothing. Like the extended essay was a good starting point to like what you might expect in college. Even TOK, just the way of thinking what you learned was a good way of like being able to like think differently in your classes and your seminars and be able to put across your point of view. So just all the little aspects of IB, once you put together the papers, the essays, the projects, it just culminates into a very like good foundation for college, because college is a lot beyond just learning. It's a good balance of writing papers, essays, and having to do exams, which we had to in IB as well. So now I know how to tackle the content of my classes and put it into different use.
Hmm.
And then IB classes, agreed, a lot more challenging in terms of their content. So a couple of classes that I did on the basic level were very similar to the content I did in IB. So just an extension of that. So it was easy in my first semester to settle in, to deal with the basic content, and as well as do beyond my academics.
Hmm. I'll make three quick points and then I'll follow up. I have a follow up for you. Three quick points for someone who's, let's say, from my end, for someone who's not coming from IB, who feels like they want to better prepare and transition to college life. One is, I think, the ability to think more abstractly, like not
Yes.
reading from a textbook, understanding material, but something like a theory of knowledge for IB students listening to the podcast is will help you like take thoughts and abstract them, like think on 100,000 feet level versus a micro level. Two, writing skills, as you said, for us, writing 1,000 words or 1,000 words or 2,000 words is no big deal at this point. I'm sure for like CBSE friends, it might have been a struggle to be just writing so much. So as much as you can practice with academic writing, which is also a different skill set. And three, I think, is research skills.
Right.
IB helps us with extended essays and IAs, but for other students whose curriculum might be less research intensive, um, really focusing on how do you find scholarly sources, how do you pick the right source, again, how do you write in academic fashion. So these are just three things where I would just like to throw it out there, and maybe the summer break before university for, let's say, a CBSE student is a good time to bridge that gap and like be as well prepared for university classes. Apart from these 3 points, have I missed anything in terms of if you are speaking to a CBSE student going to CMC, anything which they can do over the summer break to better prepare for the academic intensity?
So it's not just about the summer break before college, but from what I know of, a few my cousins and my family friends who are studying in the CBSE curriculum tend to take AP classes.
Mhm.
AP is very similar to the IB. It covers subject material just like the IB does, and then you are forced to engage in projects and research. So that alongside your CBSE curriculum helps you build on a few other essential skills that will be helpful in college. So I think that's something a lot of CBSE students do tend to do, which is not very necessary as an IB student. And AP, like CBSE doesn't give you credit in college, but if you're doing AP classes and if you're going to college that accepts credits, then AP will again be a good thing to have, like IB. But a college like CMC barely gives you credits for IB as well. So that doesn't matter. It's more about the skills you learn than the credit you're getting.
Hmm. Any tips in terms of improving academic writing skills for someone who's just not used to writing a lot or writing in an academic manner?
So I think a good foundation is to start reading papers first. Pick out research papers on some topics that interest you. I'm not saying something very complicated, just something basic that you're interested in, and see how people write, how they incorporate their research, add their own. Because if you're just putting a research in a paper, it's not producing anything new. Because in college, one major thing we learned is use sources, use good scholarly sources, but you always need to have what you think about them, what your point of view is, and take it beyond what just the sources suggest. So after you do your research and gather your information, very important to keep track of your sources and be able to cite them well, because otherwise there's lots of issues with plagiarism and all of that. But use your sources, but also incorporate your learning, your thoughts, and then produce a good paper. And there's always a lot of resources online. I'm pretty sure that professors at CMC, we have something called like the CWPD. It's for Center for Writing, and public discourse or something like that. And you can just go with any paper of yours or anything you have written, and you have just fellow students like peers of like higher grades like juniors and seniors who are trained, and they help you work through your papers to they are able to tell you if it's like good language that you're using, if it's academic enough, if it's able to convey your point of view, if you're developing a decent argument. So these are good resources to like work with and figure out academic writing and the process of it.
Yeah, lovely suggestions. And I think especially for a hypothetical high schooler listening who's actually going to CMC, a recommendation which you gave of the CWPD is probably something to check out further.
Yeah. Like at CMC, I feel like there's no bound for resources. Like we have the CWPD, we also have a center where you have like tutoring for math or like engineering related subjects, computer science, and also we always again have peer tutors who help with these kind of subjects. They also take workshops for like coding languages, like you can learn Python, you can learn um, different other languages. So they have free workshops for that. Then they have other centers. So I'm actually going to work a job in that center. It's called the Soul Center for Student Opportunity, where you have a lot of people working and advising you about what kind of extracurriculars you should do, how your resume should look like, your cover letters, how to apply for internships and all. Then we have another called Success Coaches, and they help with your time management, choosing classes and all. So it's you have help for every aspect that you need in your college life.
Hmm. I mean, venture out, ask two questions extra,
Yeah.
no harm. I've had on a previous episodes, I've had so many students who told me that only in the third or fourth year did they find out that some very useful niche resource exists in the university, and they wish they were told about it beforehand. So in this sense, I'm very glad that like we didn't have this podcast when we were applying. But for someone who's listening, these are all like interesting resources to further look into, check out, research, ask a question or two. You never know what will be helpful when.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think apart from just knowing about it, again, benefit of a small school, it's easy to find out. Like anybody you talk to will be able to tell you everything about the college because when it's in a small area, and if you just pass through it and while walking through campus, you're gonna learn about it eventually. So within the first 6 months you're there, you're gonna know everything that's on campus.
hmm. Yeah, I mean, this whole conversation, I genuinely hope that someone who didn't know about CMC before has at minimum learned something new and just have the awareness that such an option exists. And best case scenario, I'm really hoping that some students listening are actually convinced that this is a good school to apply to and this is a very interesting alternative to a big public university
Yeah.
in the US. Um,
Yeah, even I'm hoping that the international community just grows now because I feel like now people are getting to know about liberal art colleges in India and there's a growing number of students applying. So it'll be a good feeling in the next couple of years by the time I graduate to see a lot more students from where I come from there.
what do you see yourself doing after graduation?
So I feel like after graduation, I'm not so sure yet, but a couple of avenues. See, I don't see myself in a typical work atmosphere, 9 to 5. If I do also get into that, I would see myself more in the consulting because more based on strategy, interactions with people, more like fun place to work in rather than the typical finance and banking because it's very high stressful pressurizing environment. I don't see myself there as much, or I would see myself starting something of my own, coming back to India. It's a very good growing economy to do something of your own, either working with my parents back home or finding something more niche that I'm interested in and picking up on that and creating a career for myself.
Hmm. Brilliant. Well, can't let you go without the fast fire round of questions. This is one of my favorite segments of each episode. We'll just be throwing a few quick questions at you, and feel free to keep the answers brief in just one short phrase or one short sentence. So, if you're ready, we'll get into it.
Yes, I'm ready.
Perfect. We'll start with your favorite spot on the CMC campus
To study?
to study? Sure.
Okay, so there's this table right in, so we have like three quads. We have North Quad, Mid Quad, and South Quad. In the mid quad near the academic buildings, usually in the night there's this one like long empty table outdoors. When it's like dark and nobody's around, I like to go there and study during like regular days. But for midterms and finals, library, it's the best.
Mm. Awesome. An economics concept that you think applies well to life at large?
I feel like the theory of diminishing marginal utility, because I've seen it in my life. Once you've like used something or you've done something so much, at a point you're just like done with it. And then just every time you use it more, the benefits just decline.
Mm. I'm sure this next question is a story in itself, but I'll challenge you to put it into maximum of 1 or 2 sentences. What's been the favorite memory over the last year at CMC?
My favorite memory. That's a very interesting question. I must say, it's just I feel like the small parties we have in our dorm rooms and like hosting birthdays for people. So, like planning, decorating a dorm room and throwing surprises, that's been a very good part of my college experience.
Lovely. And also, again, the small, tight knit community in the small space.
Yeah.
I think we'll keep getting back to that. Um, you mentioned study abroad. So, if you had to pick from one of CMC's different study abroad destinations over the next couple of years, what would be your top choice?
So, from the options that I've seen available at CMC, Milan is a very good popular destination, especially if you want to venture out in fields of business, because you get insight into that, or probably somewhere in the UK.
Perfect. Let's end with one good book recommendation which you think a young adult should read after listening to this episode.
So, one of my favorite books was Becoming by Michelle Obama. I feel like her story was so inspiring and I learned so much out of it. And another one was Malala. So, these two books I really enjoyed reading.
Perfect. Lastly, we've touched on so many different concepts in this episode. We've touched on CMC. I pushed you in terms of the general education requirements, the tight knit community, pros and cons, the location. We touched on your classes at CMC. We've covered a lot of ground overall. But lastly, if you had to end this episode off by leaving one final message or one piece of insight, advice, wisdom for a young listener, what would your last message be?
I would always say persevere, do not fear anything, and always challenge yourself.
Lovely. Those are three good highlights.
Yeah.
I feel like I can see that coming through in your episode as well. And I feel like you've seen that in terms of growth as a 12th grader versus after finishing one year at CMC.
Yes.
I think this is good for college and life at large. So
Yeah, always.
I'm glad we wrapped up with this. Brilliant. If a listener wants to connect with follow-up questions or just wants to have a conversation, be in touch with you, what's a good way to reach out?
So I feel like a good way to reach out is always my email or my Instagram, because my phone number is always changing. Either I'm in India or back in college. So my email is dsonthalia73 at cmc.edu. And my Instagram, you can just DM me. It's just Dhriti Sonthalia and you'll be able to reach me. So those are, I think, two good ways, and I'll respond pretty quickly.
Awesome. I'll link those in the description as well of
Yeah,
this video.
that's good.
But I thoroughly enjoyed the conversation. Thank you for your wise words on University Unraveled, Dhriti, and pleasure to have you on the podcast.
I enjoyed a lot. Thank you so much for having me.
All right, that was the episode. To all the young listeners out there, I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something new, and I hope you feel more energized, inspired, and curious for the exciting university journey that lies ahead. Stay tuned. Many more wonderful episodes to be released on Uni Unveiled across a diversity of majors, countries, institutions, and speaker profiles. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Uni Unveiled. This podcast is just a small part of a much larger initiative undertaken by my family called Serene Strokes to spread positive sparks of growth, transformation, and joy among all our audience. Check out our official website www.serenestrokes.com. In the description and comments, please feel free to share other topics and questions which you would love to hear about from our different speakers on this podcast. Until then, take care and remember that this big word, university, may not be as scary or as intimidating as you think it is. Thank you for listening to Uni Unveiled.